heard me, and then I was told it was Mr. Sheaffer, Reverend Stang, and me. Now it seems to be the two of us again. Reverend Stang isn't here. Nobody was here to introduce us either. Well, still coming in. Ovid says the beginning of all things was chaos and then order emerged. I don't know how. I suppose some God did it. It's the opening of the Metamorphoses in this translation. Maybe some God will bring order out of this. Or maybe it's up to us to bring order out of it ourselves. No Stang, nobody introducing us. You know who I am. Yesterday.
I'm Robert Sheaffer. This being skepticism and blind belief. I know I'm a skeptic. I don't know what it was worse than blind belief, but that's my opinion. I didn't choose the title. I should warn you at the beginning that I'm a very dangerous man because Brett, using position, Bob Wilson has already disclosed that I'm suffering from what is called the right man syndrome. That was according to doing position. I think this is supposed to be on the cover. He says that he diagnosed this based on the title of my book. He says, right man fight as dirty as possible. It's like a pamphlet report on violent male in connection with me. But unfortunately, not all right men become criminals. I guess there is still some hope I may escape. But if any of you are right men on the back of the
This is a great beginning.
Oh,
Actually, hearing. What?
Possibilities. Is this on?
Yeah.
Oh,
Wake up. I was invited to.
Yeah.
Am I still invited?
Yeah.
Here, it must be Stang.
Yeah. Sheaffer.
Yeah.
Right.
Well organized.
don't spill the water. Page 139 of the new position. Anybody who has a copy, look it up. You will see I do not call Mr. Sheaffer an example of the right man. That was an uncritical inference he made. I use many there's a well-known test in psychology called the uncritical inference test. Way back in 69, when I began Illuminatus, I thought it would be funny to incorporate the principles of the uncritical inference test into all of my books and see how many letters I got from people who made the uncritical inferences. If you read that passage very carefully, you'll see there's an inference that he was not aware of making. And the uncritical inference test is used to show the tendency to dogmatism. People who make a lot of uncritical inferences are very dogmatic people. And the reason I put them in my books is that I am, as Mr. Sheaffer has said, a terrorist. And what I'm trying to do is scare the hell out of people to the extent that they will stop being dogmatic and become frightened of their own dogma.
Right. It says if I was on the jury, you wouldn't want me, if you were being charged with a crime, you wouldn't want me on the jury because my verdict would be quick and certain. And then he said, his verdict would be quick and certain. For some reason at this point, I think it would be called the right man syndrome. It's either uncritical inference or innuendo. Actually, it gets worse.
Is parked in front of Elm Street. It's a doctor's car. This is one of the things in the uncritical inference test. Most people assume that somebody's sick in that address. There are dozens of other people that have parked there, including a doctor ran out of gas. Those of you who have worked your way through the Illuminatus trilogy know how often this play tricks like that. It is intended to slow people down and make them think more carefully. This is scare the hell out of some people. Although Mr. Sheaffer was the only one who actually called me a terrorist so far.
Oh, but I would call you a terrorist too, but it would be.
I'm sorry.
Oh, no, it would be.
You realize,
Well, I'm in the same business.
you're real an ontologist, which is terrorism of a different kind. No, I guess I'm making these uncritical inferences when I see my name and then something outrageous that follows it. And if I'm sufficiently uncritical, I'll believe that that which immediately precedes my name applies to me, such as where he says, quantum psychology that I support the banning of books, such as the supposed banning of human rights books, because they will only remain banned for 10 years. And then he compares me to the Nazis and suggests that if I were around when the Nazis were banning books, that I would approve, because they came back into print just 10 years later. Mr. Sheaffer regards those who express horror about Nazi banning of books as also shedding crocodile tears. Here's your bit. Okay, the whole thing. In a review of my book, The New Inquisition, Robert Sheaffer argues that worrying about book burning amounts to shedding crocodile tears. Well, there's an uncritical inference for you guys, because I said no such thing. I've got the review here if anybody wants to read it. But you can always put words into the mouths of those who
This is going to be a good alley fight.
okay? Robert Sheaffer argues that worrying about book burning amounts to shedding crocodile tears when the books only remain banned for 10 years. I said that. I never said that.
That's what you said in your review.
I never said that. Where did I say that? Now here's the review. Where did I say that, sir? Okay.
Well, you explain the wow well.
I don't believe there's such a thing as skeptical. Anybody who does believe there's such a thing should be shot. No, how could there be? It's against the laws of human nature for people not to believe. You have to believe in all sorts of ridiculous, insane things like the Bible, or UFO reports, Marvel comics. I mean, all this fucking dull, you know. But how can you know? I think you have to totally believe in something before you can really disbelieve it. In other words, for you to properly understand just what a lie the Church of the 17th is, you would have to spend at least $20.
Starts off with the immaculate fornication and it gets worse than that. Bible movie.
Well, it is beautifully written. It's one of the greatest works of literature.
I'm sure it is.
I'm coming from the point of view that sort of when I walk into a bookstore and see the different sections I've got labeled, occult, psychology, history, science, fiction, whatever. I think they should all be labeled humor. Because they label my books all in the humor section when they really shouldn't be. They should be in several others.
Hey, I see your books in the New Age section.
Oh, really? Oh, some genius put them there, Dan. We like to go in and move into the religion section. But then, then if you're going to do that, be fair, you ought to move the Bible over to the humor section. And that's why we realized the simplest thing would be just to change the section names. You would have to move the books.
What I'm trying to figure out is why we skeptics constitute an inquisition. Because what we're doing is we're simply looking at these claims some of these people are making and pointing out some rather obvious holes in them. Now, if somebody has evidence to support a claim, this is fine. This is great. Now, it says in here that we are a fundamentalist, materialist institution and organization, meaning that we just absolutely disbelieve without even investigating. Also says he would support a so-called liberal materialist organization, which investigated first and then published its findings.
I wanted the crocodile tears.
Well, the crocodile tears are in there, but the 10-year banning of support is not. That's what I call a factoid. That's one of the primary supports of the Wilsonian reality.
I can see.
The truth and have, well, then I got about 6 or 8
Actually, Wright's books were banned for a lot more than 10 years. Some of them, the first one came back in the
but because he was a cancer quack. What he got in trouble with was with the FDA over a supposed cancer therapy of orgone energy. Now, as far as the so-called ban, what actually happened was the FDA was going to issue an injunction because things have to come to court, and he was issued a subpoena to come and defend himself against this injunction. He consulted with his lawyer as to what to do. The lawyer said you have to go and defend yourself. He essentially refused to do it on his principles. Okay, his principles are fine, but on the other hand, if your principles say that you should not go and defend yourself against this proposed injunction, then you take whatever your opponent gives because they went by default. So in that case, it was a very harsh sort of a thing saying enjoining him and anyone directly working with him from selling his orgone energy stuff, and that included promoting, they even wrote his books and everything else in there because they were trying to essentially prevent what they viewed as
To protect us.
this
Like with the anti-marijuana law.
Exactly. It was that kind of thing.
In actual fact, Wright did not sell orgone accumulators, he rented them. They were used under the supervision of medical doctors. Everybody who rented one had to have a medical doctor sign a certificate that it was being used under their supervision. Wright never claimed to have a cancer cure. And the 3 reports he wrote on the use of the orgone accumulator in cancer, all 3 patients died, and Wright stressed the fact he did not have a cure. He said he had an experimental device that was worthy of further investigation. And it was for that crime, asking for further scientific investigation, that the FDA descended on him and broke over 20 of their own laws, according to the Israeli journalist who wrote the book, The United States of America versus Wilhelm Reich, which is the chief source of all the legal documents referring to the case.
What Bob just said is correct, but I urge you to read this. You got something like this time, but reading it here, it comes across as very different. It's a horrible citadel of science. These sinister inquisitors came in their boats and they, burned and banned his books weird because they said heretical things.
They did burn his books in an incinerator in New York. They did go into his laboratory and chop up his scientific equipment to axes. I do regard that as inquisitorial behavior.
Did he die?
That shows I'm some kind of extremist. That was what science used to stand for, is the right of people to do experiments.
But it has nothing to do with science. It's the government. It's the FDA trying to protect you.
I know those fuckers are always trying to protect me from something. I wish they'd leave me the hell alone. I am 60 years old. It's time they try to treat me like an adult and let me make my own decisions. They're protecting me from travel to certain places. They're afraid I might see something that would shock me. Protect me from one bloody thing or another. When I reach 80, do they then start treating me like an adult and let me think for myself?
What does Mark Gardner have to do with all this? He keeps saying, the scientific establishment under the persecution of Martin Gardner picking on poor Wilhelm Reich. What does he have to do with this?
Martin Gardner had the honesty to object to the burning of Wright's books, which I acknowledge. He did not try to justify it like you did. The books weren't really bad, they were just unavailable. I read 2 of Wright's books during the period when they were all banned in people's libraries. They wouldn't let me take them home because they were so damn valuable. That's how I. They were banned to all intents and purposes in the ordinary sense of the word banned. And Gardner objected to that and gave him credit for it. But he did help wamp up the hysteria against Wright, which several others were involved in.
Because he wrote a book criticizing Reich's theories?
Because the nature of his discussion of Wright was such as to create the impression that Wright was a cancer quack, whereas Wright was very careful about not making any claims about that, except that some of the experimental results looked hopeful, and he had 18 physicians doing further research with the exactly the way they stopped LSD research in 1966, and with the same stupid, the same wonderful rationalization, they are protecting us because we are so childish, we might be deceived. And professors at universities are so childish, they might be deceived to do more research. And we all have to be protected.
Yeah, but of course the CIA guys had to do a lot of LSD just in case the Russians captured it and used it on them. But they were allowed. In fact, they had to.
I see, but if you believe the kind of stuff that Bob has been writing here, the skeptics are not really wrong. They're pig-headed, they're bull-headed, they're ignorant, they're willfully ignorant. For example, he says, we just absolutely refuse to even look at anything. He says, Darwin put off believe not only that their work demonstrates the reality of distant viewing, but that everyone has a talent latently. That even they claim they can teach it to anybody, however skeptical, and have a standing invitation to all skeptics to come to their laboratory and have a go at it. Now, this is in the Illuminati papers, so imagine how pig-headed we must be that there's a standing invitation to go to the parapsychology lab and we refuse to do it. Well, when we catch you again, because Puthoff himself says this guy is, he got it all wrong. In fact, for years, skeptics, and especially James Randi, were attempting to get information from those two books, who he calls charitably, in his own way, the Laurel and Hardy side. And they basically were, I hate to use the word cover up, but let's just say that they were not forthcoming with the data. So what you read in the works of Bob Wilson bears little or no reality to what is actually going on with the skeptics, the skeptical inquirer, and the like.
Well, at the time I wrote that, Puthoff and Todd were in the process of closing down that research. Puthoff was now at the Institute for Advanced Studies in Boston, working on quantum physics and developed this whole area. At the time I wrote that, there was an invitation out in the Bay Area for people to come and join the research.
Not what Puthoff says here.
But that was later. That was after the book was published. You know, come on. You know, the time between you write something and the time that you share it print is over a year and a half.
Randy was trying for years to get in there. And should I say that in at least the version, again, Randy, as he appears in here, is a cartoon character of wickedness. That he simply tells people...
All my characters are cartoon characters.
Okay.
I'm a cartoon character. Haven't you noticed that?
As long as we're honest about what we write. The problem is when you mention real people and you attribute views to them that they don't hold, and you attribute actions to them and so on that they never really took or never advocated, then you're creating some false impression. And it's hard enough.
Thank you. I've read the position about 3 times, and I subscribe to your book, your magazine.
The Skeptical Inquirer. Yes.
Ever say.
Yes.
What is the Cyclops version of guarding the European athletes and their parcels?
The Gauquelin business. Basically, Rollins, as you know, charged cover-up and so on, that the Cyclops had fudged this and covered up that and so on. And actually, Rollins had several articles in the Skeptical Inquirer in which he was able to present his version of that. I think I wrote down which issue those were. If anybody wants to go, if I can find it, and if anybody wants to go and check it out. He had like 5 pages in the issue in 1980, I think, and then he had, let's see, Rollins had a 5.5-page article in the winter of 79-80, Skeptical Inquirer. This was before this Star Baby thing was published in Fate. After that, he had a 6-page article in which he was permitted to tell his side of the story. Now, Phil Klass wrote a refutation to this long paper called Star Baby. He wrote a refutation called The Cry Baby, submitted it to Fate, in which he adamantly refused to publish it. He talked about cover-up. However, we are in the process of scanning this and putting this on, it'll be out on the internet and science.skeptic and all that for those of you who have electronic access. So you'll be able to
they always cut out the lines in which he referred to their altering of the statistics. And that's why he finally resigned from SciCop. Marcello Truzzi resigned from SciCop, on the other hand, because he decided it was not skeptical at all. It was a dogmatic organization upholding establishment models. And several others have followed Truzzi's exodus with the same general approach. I personally think I'm the skeptic here because I don't trust conventional models. I think they should all be challenged and questioned. And I don't like the attitude that anybody who challenges the conventional or accepted models is some kind of nut and should be scorned, stoned, banned, bowdlerized, and generally treated like a terrorist. Questioning accepted dogma is not terrorism. It only seems like terrorism to people who have a desperate emotional need for dogma.
Questioning the cherished alternative, or putting it less charitably, crackpot notions is indeed unacceptable. It makes us inquisitors. Well, of course, the Inquisition in the bad old days would arrest people and torture them and burn them at the stake. We became inquisitors today simply by just questioning claims of people who are making all these things. But Bill Cooper, we heard him a little while ago, saying how all this mind control of the CIA and the conspiracy can erase everything from anyone's mind they want to. Well, then why didn't they erase all this from his mind and keep it even better hidden?
You asked me once, why do I make fun of the same people you make fun of and object to it when you make fun of them? The answer is that I spread my sarcasm around equally. I've got the dogmatists on both sides with your sarcasm, and you go to the dogmatists on the opposite side. Okay, most of you here have read my book. Somebody thinks that was a fair statement, my sarcasm. You're a little prejudiced by your commitment to your ideology.
Right. And how many of you then think I must be the violent male who fights as dirtily as possible based on the title of a book? Right.
Remember, I did not say that. That was an uncritical inference.
Uncritical assumption. Merely the paragraph about the violent male follows my discussion of my name and says somehow I am reminded of.
I'm going to send you the uncritical inference test as soon as I get home, and you'll see how you fall into these traps. Anybody who's ever taken one of my quantum psychology workshops has been given the uncritical inference test. Anybody here ever taken any of those workshops? No. The uncritical inference test is used in psychology classes all over the country. I use it continually. And most people fall into most of the traps. The great thing about this test, it not only measures your susceptibility to uncritical inference, but by making you aware of it, you start correcting yourself. So it's a teaching device as well as a measuring device.
I see. So,
And, in Illuminatus, with no ideology, with no attempt to be sarcastic to either wing of any controversy, just as a casual example, almost every reader of Illuminatus thought Rebecca Goodman was Jewish. Her husband is Jewish, her first name Rebecca is Jewish, her last name Goodman is Jewish. You don't find out till on page 900 that she's Irish. This was another of my attempts to show people how they make inferences without even realizing they're making inferences. And you'll find hundreds of things like this in all of my books. Those of you who've gone through The Widow's Son know that any inference you make anywhere in that book is uncertain by the time you get to the last page. That's what he calls terrorism, but what I call it is, well, Aristotle called it the sign of an educated mind, the ability to entertain a hypothesis without taking a definite yes or no position on it immediately.
or to just to tell one side of the story and to ridicule, say, skeptics, without actually having...
You mean I never ridiculed Bill Cooper? I never ridiculed Pat Robinson? I never ridiculed George Bush. I only ridiculed you people. You have selective perception. You see, you don't realize you think because you are hurt. I know you're hurt. You're hurt. You think you're the sole target of it. I spend very little time attacking SciCop. Most of my time is attacking the State Department
because otherwise I would think you're criticizing a book you haven't read and a journal you haven't read.
And the journal changed his name 3 times.
No,
I got
it changed his name once.
No, first it was the Zetetic, then it was the, before it was the, first of the Zetetic was the very first time. Then came the Zetetic, oh, I forget. But the Skeptic Inquirer is the third. It didn't follow right after the Zetetic.
Well, you said
But why do we argue about trivialities?
I'm just pointing out that it seems to me when I see a journal criticized and a committee criticized under the wrong name, this author, Bungie criticized as Mungie, then the article following it, which says precisely the opposite, is ignored, and he says there's no dissenting opinions to guide Bungie, when in fact the article immediately following it dissents strongly. It says to me that this guy is criticizing a journal he hasn't even really read, whereas it does just...
Well, Bungie, in quantum psychology, I apologize for Bungie. I had a friend who had a love story that got published, and the last sentence came out, he kicked her under the solar stairs. What the author wrote was he kissed her under the silent stars. What happens to a copy when it falls into the hands of typesetters? Every writer has had horrible, nightmarish experiences. I wrote the New Inquisition in Ireland. I corrected the proofs in Boulder, Colorado. The quotes from Bungie are correct. Why the hell his name got wrong, I don't know. But not having the magazine in front of me at the time, I thought Bungie looked right. It was consistent throughout. In the second volume, this happens to everybody, not just to me. People in one of the debates bring up trivial chicken shit points like this to get away from the major philosophical points. But in volume 2 of Illuminatus, you will notice that Callisti is spelled wrong every time it appears, even though it's right in volumes 1 and 3. Now, do you think I am so defective mentally that I can get it right in volume 1 and then fall off into some kind of brain failure, get it wrong all through 2, and then get it right again in 3? No, they had a different proofreader on volume 2. These things happen.
Yeah, I just want you to elaborate a little bit on the non-critical inference thing, because I find something about it a little bit bothersome. It's what you're basically saying, that in this instance that that Mr. Sheaffer brought up about your the inference about Psychop being the Grand Inquisitor or whatever, that it was a deliberately false inference based on training people in a technique of figuring out that was not what they were supposed to infer. I don't really follow that.
Well, the idea, the uncritical inference test, the way it's generally used, it's, as I said, it measures the tendency, and it also gives people feedback so they start correcting the tendency. The way I use it in my books, the way I plan to use it, is when people do fall into these traps and write me letters about them, I can correct them by letter, which works very effectively and efficiently. When you try to do it on the stage, it doesn't work. I see quite so clearly it looks like I'm pulling a trick. Well, it is a trick, but it's a trick with an important philosophical point in it.
And I suppose Oliver North would claim the same thing, that he was doing uncritical inference trick to his testimony.
Anybody who's read my books from the beginning is familiar with this technique. They know that I'm doing it all the time. That divides my readers into 2 groups: those who stick with me because they like the challenge of trying to figure out where the traps are, and those who give up because they think I'm a terrorist and I'm either a Satanist trying to take them over, or I'm a psychologist working for the KGB and I'm trying to brainwash them. But those who are not terrorized get to enjoy the game. It's not something they invented in the New Inquisition. Those of you who have read any of my books before that know I've been using it from the beginning. It's part of, that's why I am classified in most books on modern literature as a postmodernist. I'm not the only one who uses this technique. I use it more blatantly and more frequently, but it is part of postmodern fiction. It was not kind of technique.
And that's how much lawyers do.
It started with Joyce and Ulysses, actually. Somebody?
Me, I have a question. When you wrote the sentences that used Robert Sheaffer's name in the same sentence as the right man that caused him to make a strange...
That's not in the same sentence.
Well, the
That's
same
an uncritical
paragraph.
inference.
It's the one that follows immediately after.
Oh, okay. actually read his work that you were referring to and making a conclusion that he's a right man? And what was that based on?
Well, the sentence, as I remember it, is for some reason, I think at this point, about the right man syndrome.
Yeah.
Now, for some reason, can be regarded as sarcasm. I think, well, for some reason, Mr. Sheaffer reminds me of this. Or for some reason, can be interpreted as meaning I'm about to change the subject whimsically. And this is very similar to a lot of the tricks in Ulysses, like how many does Gary Owen speak Gaelic, or is Gary Owen a nice clean dog or a dirty dog?
Have you ever written any car
Depends on
warranties?
which page of the book you look at.
You ever written any car warranties and they have to guess which parts are true and really under warranty and which ones are not? Would that be a lot?
Well, I think, no, seriously.
Some creative writing here.
I think postmodern literature is directly inspired by the fact that car warranties, advertisements, State Department utterances, and so damn much in the modern world is playing these tricks on people that literature, just like films, a lot of modern films like Wesson Wells' After Fate, which is a fake movie about a fake biography of an art faker. These developments in the arts are necessary because we're living in a culture in which there are so many clever professional liars that art has to simulate this to convey the sense of crisis of the modern world. That's why I use conspiracy theory so much.
So when you write something that mentions real people and real events and is full of holes and creates the wrong expression in people's mind, and you're called on it, just proclaim it to be postmodernism. So.
Dr. Wilson, would you just read the passage that he's referring to? Let us look our decision.
For instance, Mr. Robert Sheaffer of Psychop has recently written a book called The UFO Verdict. He'll be speaking about that shortly. I have not yet read it and therefore do not presume to criticize it. But I cannot help noticing the classic fundamentalism of the title. A muddlehead like myself cannot even put together a plausible UFO theory yet, not even to my own satisfaction. I've accepted the Persinger theory by now. This was several years ago, not as explaining all UFO sightings, but as explaining the overwhelming majority. But at this point, I was totally, every theory I could consider seemed equally implausible. A muddlehead like myself cannot even put together a plausible UFO theory yet, not even to my own satisfaction, but Mr. Sheaffer has a verdict. No! He is even more wonderful than that. He hasn't really got himself a verdict. He has the verdict. As the reader knows by now, and every reader of my books does know this, by the time they're halfway through any one of my books, as the reader knows by now, I am a simple, ignorant man with a bloody vocabulary. You would want me on the jury, I think, if you were charged with a major felony. I don't think you would really want Mr. Sheaffer on the jury if you were charged with a misdemeanor traffic violation. The verdict would be quick and certain. And here is your opportunity for uncritical inference. For some reason, at this point, I think of what has been called the right man syndrome. And you can take for some reason as sarcasm, or you can take it to mean I'm changing the subject. And you will find hundreds of variations of this in every book I've written, just so I can have the pleasure of sitting down writing letters to people telling them you got to learn to read more carefully. And I generally send them a copy of the uncritical inference test along with my letter. And I think it's a legitimate pedagogic device.
We talked, but when you mentioned like about Psychop, for example, so that Mr. Randy of Psychop arrived, and without entering the house, talking about the so-called poltergeist case, right? Without entering the house, announced it was all a fraud. The Rex family offended, refused to let Mr. Randy into the house, whereupon he left, presumably still knowing it was all a fraud. Now that is a travesty on what really happened, because Randy went there with 3 or 4 people from Psychop, and they said, we'd like to come in and investigate still knowing he was on the phone. You imply that he got there.
What I said next is like Randy, I didn't get into the house either, so I don't know what was going on.
Right, but you ignored that.
That's a horrible example of terrorism again.
When you mention what names of people and you imply things to them, and imply attitudes and imply actions that are plainly ridiculous if they were true, I think you're being grossly unfair to your readers. You're certainly being unfair to Randy because you've got all kinds of people out there. Maybe they are uncritical influencers. I don't know. They're jumping all over Randy because they're reading this kind of stuff and taking it seriously. And so I think that's a fair way to treat anyone, whether it's a friend or...
Oh, I don't think I make Randy look like any more of an idiot than I make myself look like. I write comedy. My technique is to make everybody look a little bit absurd so they'll take themselves less seriously. Is there any book where I don't end up looking like an idiot myself? With a gaudy vocabulary.
Yeah.
I never claim to be intelligent. I think that fool a lot of people because I do have a terrific vocabulary, but that's memory, that's not intelligence.
You're not supposed to give that away. Stop.
I read your books even if you are a terrorist. I don't care. And I thought it was really great though that you're lecturing Sheaffer on government interference because he's kind of a far-out libertarian. I thought that was wonderfully ironic. But in your book, The New Inquisition, there's one place where you take after Jacob Bronowski, of all people, on the grounds that he supposedly said in one of his books, which you named, that the Asians never, more or less said that the Asians never accomplished anything, because they were incapable of it. And I went and reread that book. I didn't find anything like that. I was wondering where it was in there. In fact, I read his other books where he says just about exactly the opposite.
I'm a great admirer of Bronowski. Really, for years, I've been a great admirer of Bronowski. There is, I think it's called Science and Human Values, he talks about his investigations at Hiroshima, and he said the Japanese seemed incapable of observation or accurate reporting in the Western sense, and he says things that imply either their culture is so inferior to ours, or maybe their genetics are so inferior to ours that they just can't communicate in a scientific sense. And I thought that was a shocking lapse in somebody like Bronowski.
I thought that was, to me, that's an example of uncritical inference on your part, because I read a lot of his other works, and he says exactly the opposite. He's a very tolerant man. There's a section of the Ascent of Man that's practically a masterpiece of the advocacy of tolerance, very passionate.
In general, I know. So I like Bronowski. I read a lot of his work. I admire a great deal of it, but there is this weird thing about the Japanese. And since this thing has developed the structure of Mr. Sheaffer being on the attack and me being on the defensive, and it's almost over, we've only got about 10 minutes to go, I'd like to switch it a bit. And your review, in either your review of the New Inquisition or in the letter in which you replied to somebody who pointed out how many times you had distorted my position, you described me as posing as an anarcho libertarian. That assumes you know what I really am. Would you explain to the audience how you know what I really am and whether this involves extrasensory powers? What I really am.
I wish I knew for sure what he really is, but here's why I doubt that he is an anarcho-libertarian, okay? Because in Cosmic Trigger, Bob is telling us how he was living on welfare while working on his conspiracy research, which is kind of an un-libertarian thing to do. Libertarians don't like government welfare, don't like picking the pocket of...
You just don't know members of different syndicates. This is one aspect of anarchist theory called panarchy. But the idea of a guaranteed annual wage, I brought that up several times because one time I was giving a talk at NYU and I brought it up, and somebody in the audience went into a kind of silence and then spoke up and said it won't work. And I thought that was fascinating. That's something I've been thinking about for 30 years. This guy can decide in about 10 seconds whether it will work or not.
Maybe he thought about it for 40 years.
No, he had obviously just heard of it, but it only took him about 10 seconds to figure out it wouldn't work. And that is the thing that has always fascinated me, these people who know immediately what's true and what's false. This is known as conditioned reflex in psychology. And it is what most of my books are intended to undermine. They intend to put a block in so the conditioned reflex doesn't function mechanically, and there is a pause for real thought. As posing as an anarcho-libertarian, you deduced I'm not a real anarcho-libertarian because I'm not a dogmatist. Stranger's whole position is any dogma you accept is the antithesis of anarchy. So that is the extreme of individualist anarchism. The Stringer, who the hell is more extreme than Stringer?
Still, a libertarian would say, in Rome, you got to get a job rather than try to put it in someone else's job.
Money out, they stole you in the first place.
Exactly. Where the hell did they get the money? Out of my taxes. So I got some of it back. I'm proud of myself. I wish I got more of it back. I wish I could get it all back. No, he's a moralist. I'm not. I'm a Stringer, right? If I get anything back that they stole from me, I will. Okay, we've only got 2 minutes, so instead of continuing my attack on him, I'll let him attack me for 2 minutes again, because he's really
I would say that I think the major underlying message of Dr. Wilson and Mr. Stang and the Church of Bob is that absolute answers are mind-blowing, and that what we're talking about is more questions, continuing questions. You never learn absolute answers, because once you learn an answer, it's over. You might as well quit thinking.
So we're only really thinking if we never come to a conclusion?
We've only got 2 minutes, but I will try to defend that in 2 minutes. Fortunately, David Bohm has done it so brilliantly that I don't have to do it myself. I'll just quote as much of Bohm as I can. Bohm won the Nobel Prize, one of the leading quantum physicists. He points out the difference between thinking and thought. Thought is what we've done in the past, and it's stored in our brains and computers and libraries and various places. As long as you're guided by thought, you don't have time for thinking. So the only way you can do any thinking is to regard all the thought that hasn't been done as potentially false, and then go ahead and start thinking. Because as long as you're hypnotized by the thought that's on storage, you can't get ahead into the thinking that has to be done now to solve today's problems. Bohm defended this in several articles in several places, and it is the general attitude of modern science in general, although it's never been heard of in PsyCop. It is the attitude is if it's on file, and the way I generally put it is knowledge is the death of intellect. Once you think you've got knowledge, then you don't need to think about it anymore. If you think you got knowledge about 10 subjects, there are 10 things you don't think about. If you got knowledge of 100 subjects, there are 100 things you don't think about. If you reach the point where you think you got knowledge about everything, you don't think at all anymore, and then you get a flat line on the brain scan. Then you are subject to the election in the Vatican. And I will not say or psych-up because he's expecting me to, and I don't want to relate him any more than I have already.
I did want to ask one more question, though. Would you tell us what your thesis, as it were, was about? I hear everybody saying Dr. Wilson here, and now mostly it doesn't say where the degree comes from. You said it's from Hawthorne University.
Okay. It comes, I got it from Paideia University. I generally say Hawthorne because they changed the name to Hawthorne the next year, and I figure eventually somebody is going to look it up and they can't find Paideia anymore, so they'll find it under Hawthorne.
I looked it up, and what it says 10 Hawthorne faculty have their highest degrees from Pi Dei. And so that just kind of sounds to me like something that creationists do. And I just wonder, what, now the schools have phone number disconnected, so what kind of work?
Okay, when I got the degree at Pi Dei, it was run by Dr. Malcolm McDowell, got his PhD in sociology from Princeton. Pi Dei, it was very experimental. The next thing, after I got my degree, and the next year it got even more experimental. It lost state approval and was reduced to state authorization. State authorization